عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Once again, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dearest brothers and sisters, we come together today to talk about the subject of depression. But in front of you, you see a slide which says the word sadness, and there's a reason for that. Inshallah, I'm going to get to that. Now, what's the big deal with this topic? Well, this topic is something which is globally recognized to be one of the diseases or illnesses which is rapidly growing. It's said to affect around 350 million people across the world. It's also said to be one of the biggest financial burdens on the healthcare system in this country. We spend billions on it. And as a pharmacist, it's one of the most common medicines that we dispense on a daily basis. Anxiolytics, what we call antidepressants, is one of the most common medicines that a pharmacist is dispensing on a daily basis. Now, there's something else I want to get out of this talk with you today, okay? And it's to take a step back and look at this topic through an Islamic lens, an Islamic point of view. And one of the challenges I gave myself today is to try and dispel a myth that a lot of people have either consciously or subconsciously about the Quran. And the myth is as follows. If I asked you, bro, what does the Quran talk about? Like, what kind of things does the Quran talk about in general? What kind of subjects and themes does the Quran talk about? What would you say to that question? You can shout them out if you want to. Worship, okay. What else?
How to live your life.
Who said that? How to live your life? But imagine if you're doing a survey on the street and you're asking Muslims, like, you know the Quran, like, what does it talk about exactly?
Charity.
Charity? I think a lot of people say charity. What would be like the top things then?
Prophets.
What does the Quran? Prophets? No one's going to say hellfire? Everyone's thinking of that. Hellfire. Excuse me, I'm just recovering from the flu as well. Day of Judgment, another one, right?
Yeah.
Hereafter, Day of Judgment, hellfire, paradise. Stories? Quran has a lot of stories, no? Now, the issue I have with this, subhanAllah, is that what those answers indicate, number one, is many people have very superficial understanding of the Quran and what it talks about. Because the Quran is not just talking about those subjects, though it is part of what the Quran speaks about. The Quran speaks about beautiful things. And what the Quran speaks about are the things which are relevant to our daily lives. It speaks about the dilemmas that we face on a daily basis, and it gives us guidance on how to navigate our way out of those dilemmas. And one of the best examples of this is the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. Who's heard the story of Yusuf alayhi salam as told by the Quran? Yeah, most of you, if not all of you. Now Yusuf alayhi salam, the young boy, Joseph, he faces 4 trials in his life. 4 challenges. What's the first trial he faces? What's the first challenge he has in his life? It comes from his brothers, right? Jealousy. Hasad. Yeah? Jealousy. Being the victim of jealousy. And not just any other person, it's his own brothers. Jealousy. Is that a common trial that people go through in their life?
Yes.
Have you ever been the victim of jealousy? Have you ever taken a selfie and people start giving you the evil eye? Yeah. Partly your fault, but it happens. Yeah. People become jealous of what you have. What's the second trial that he goes through? What's the second trial? When he's growing up in the palace, his master, he's a slave. What's the second trial he goes through? Yes, the crazy lady. Yeah, Imra'atul Aziz, as the Quran calls her, the wife of the Aziz, she becomes infatuated with him. And she tries it on with him. Yeah. قالت هيت لك. She even locks the doors one day and she tries it on with him. The trial of temptation. Now, is that a common trial or not? Very common trial, isn't it? It's a trial that perhaps affects every single one of us. Yeah? And it's a trial that keeps on coming back to affect us during different parts of our lives. Perhaps in this moment of your life, it's one of the biggest trials that you're facing. You don't need to admit to that, but I'm pretty sure it is. Right, so the first one is jealousy, the second one is temptation. What's the third one? What happens to him when he refuses? Prison. So what kind of trial is that? Loneliness. What are you the victim of though? Lies. Injustice. Very good. Dhulm. He is the victim of oppression. He's sent to prison for no good reason. He doesn't even know how long he's going to be there for. How many Muslims around the world are victims of oppression today? Yeah. Dhulm. Oppression. Being the victim of oppression is such a common trial. Now, which clever person can tell me the fourth trial? What's the fourth trial? Yes, sister, you had your hand up. The trial of what, sorry?
The trial of wealth and status.
Very good. The trial of power. When a person gets a little bit of power in their life, a small promotion, it becomes a tyrant, isn't it? The moment you get your qualification, the moment you become a doctor, you start looking down everybody else. These guys, ignorant people, fools, they don't know anything. I'm the expert in my field. Isn't that true? It goes to their head. Yusuf al-Islam comes out of prison and he lands a job which makes him the second most influential person in the whole of the Egyptian empire. He becomes the Aziz of the country. Okay, comes from prison to that status overnight. That's a trial. Yeah, the trial of authority. And each and every one of those trials, not only was his trial, but is a trial that is faced by most people in their life. And Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah would say, this is one of the reasons why the story of Yusuf alayhi salam is so loved by many people. Because they can read into his story their own lives. Okay? Now, this story, what does it illustrate? It illustrates to us that actually the Quran just doesn't talk about those faraway concepts. It talks about things to do with me, now and here. On top of that, what it does also teach us is that the Quran gives you guidance on how to navigate your way through those trials, which is essentially what we want. We want to know what to do when you face those trials. Now, besides Yusuf, besides Joseph in the story, there's also other narratives that are intertwined, other stories. There's another character who also goes through a very difficult trial in that story. Does anyone know who this person is? Who else in the story? He's quite a prominent feature and he goes through some difficult times. His father, yes, Yaqub, Jacob. Yaqub alayhi salam is actually going to be one of the people we were speaking about in this lecture, inshallah. What is his trial? The trial of feeling sadness. Yeah, trial of sadness. So if you put that together, you're thinking to yourself, okay, so the Quran spoke about things relevant to me, then there's a person who is feeling, Allah says feels incredibly sad. And the Quran also is going to provide me through his story a way to navigate my way through the same dilemma. Therefore, I should study whose life? Yaqub alayhi salam. Yeah? Yaqub alayhi salam. Inshallah, this is what I hope to do. But before we do that, the word I've chosen to title this topic is not depression, it's sadness. Why is that the case? The reason is because in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, there is no word depression. Okay? There's no word like depression. And it's not because the word or the illness was not recognized by Allah or the Prophet ﷺ, but for a more wise reason than that. So what the Quran presents to us are many synonyms, words that are used to describe the feeling of sadness. And I want to just go through a few of them. The first one is gham. Yeah, the word gham, from it you get the word ghamam, which means clouds. But in Arabic you have the word sihab as well, which means cloud. Anyone know the difference between sihab and ghamam? They said ghamam are the dark clouds, the ones that eclipse the sun and become dark. So the idea of gham, sadness, is tied to dark clouds. And it's a type of sadness that people experience because of pessimism, negative thinking. You always feel like there's a dark cloud hanging over your head. And no, we're not talking about the husbands here. We're talking about people who are very pessimistic in life. They just feel sad because they feel like just something bad is about to happen. Yeah? This is a type of sadness that Allah spoke about in the Quran. Gham, like the Battle of Uhud. During the Battle of Uhud, the Muslims, they were winning. But then a turn of events happened and they began to suffer. And someone put out a rumor that the Prophet ﷺ has been killed. Allah said, many people felt gham at that moment. Yeah? Why? Because they became very pessimistic. Some of the companions, in fact, they sat down on the floor and said, what is the point fighting now? Until a man came to them and said, did you fight for the Prophet ﷺ or did you fight for Allah? Even if he is dead, Allah is living. Fight. Yeah? So that was a type of sadness to do with pessimism. If somebody wants to figure out how to deal with their pessimistic thinking, they should look at what the Quran says about gham. Another word, huzn. La khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun. The Quran says many times. This word for sadness is mentioned 42 times in the Quran. And it refers to a sadness over a trauma. Something that happened to you in your past which makes you feel grieved, makes you feel sad. Like they would say a farmer who's spent his whole year planting and sowing, and then what happens, a storm comes along and it destroys his crops. He feels huzn over the loss of that. Or a brother, maybe one of you brothers, mashallah, trying to get married, and then he makes a proposal, goes to the house, everything looks fantastic, it looks like they'll go ahead, and all of a sudden things turn south. Bichara, he feels huzn. Yeah. Only man, if things would have gone right that way, maybe I'll be married today. Yeah? Huzn. Some of you laughed this. I wasn't talking about you. I was just making things up. So this is another word for sadness. This word is very interesting. Bath. Bath means to spread. This type of sadness refers to sadness that has permeated the whole body. It's spread throughout your whole body to the extent that you can tell by looking at someone's physical features that they are feeling sad. It's the most extreme form of sadness. There's only one person in the Quran which Allah says felt bath. Does anyone know who that person is? Who felt bath in the Quran? Someone whose sadness is spread throughout his whole body. In fact, it changed the way he looked. Yaqub, very good. Yaqub alayhi salam described as having experienced bath. Also, one of the meanings of bath is sadness that lingers. Sadness that lingers and continues on for a long period of time. And to be honest, this is probably the word that closely resembles our understanding of depression, isn't it? What is depression? Many different definitions, but it's the idea of having low mood for a long period of time. Some people say 2 weeks or more, and to the point that you don't feel like doing the things that you used to like doing. Yeah, this is roughly one of the definitions of depression. The word bath is about sadness that spreads throughout your whole body, is debilitating, and secondly, it lingers as well. So perhaps this is one of the words that will closely resemble the word depression. Then there is the word asaf. Asaf is a type of sadness which manifests itself through negative emotions, like anger. Someone becomes sad. Exam time. Oh no, I feel so sad. Okay, I'm stressed, I'm worried. And then what happens? The brother says to him, bro, do you want to go for some chicken and chips? Do you think I've got time for chicken and chips? Got exam tomorrow, man. What's wrong with you? Alright, bro, we've got to eat, innit? So this brother, mashallah, he's experiencing asaf. He's sad, but he's venting it out by way of anger. Yeah. So one of the beautiful things about this analysis is the way the Quran is so sophisticated in highlighting different types of feelings and not lumping them together under one word. Also, these types of words are then placed in the Quran where you can identify how to deal with that emotion by looking at what Allah said about it. So now we have the case of Yaqub alayhi salam. Now just to give you the background story, Yaqub alayhi salam, he had one son who he loved more than the others. Okay, his favorite son was Yusuf alayhi salam. Now his other sons became jealous, and what did they do? They kidnapped him. And I say kidnapped because when they came back to tell their dad that apparently a wolf had eaten him, he didn't believe them. And he said, قال بل سولت لكم أنفسكم أمرا. He said, your souls have only beautified the matter. Meaning, I don't believe you, you're just justifying it to yourselves. I don't believe you. Meaning, I know he's still alive, but I don't know where he is. Now, that's worse than knowing your son is dead, isn't it? If you knew your son is dead, you can deal with that. If you know that your son is not dead, but you don't know where he is, that's worse. Yeah. But this was an extremely traumatic piece of news for Yaqub alayhi salam. And what did he say after telling his sons, you're making it up? He said, فَصَبْرٌ Jameel. He said, I'm going to have a beautiful patience. Now what does it mean to have a beautiful patience? Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah said, it means to have a patience bila shakwa, where you don't complain about things. You keep yourself to yourself. You don't moan, you don't whine, you don't whinge. You keep all of those feelings or those expressions to yourself. You don't have any complaint whatsoever. That is how sabr becomes jameel. Now that's the first time things went sour. However, many years later, there will be a famine and the brothers have to go all the way to Egypt to get ration from the Aziz. They don't know that's Yusuf. Yusuf doesn't tell them his identity. But what he does say is, if you want to come back next year, then you better bring that other brother of yours, the one that you've kept. Because they said to him, look, we've got this 11 of us. And he says, well, there's only 10 of you here, so where's the 11th one? He knows there's another brother. But in that way, he's planning. So when they come back to Dad, they say, Dad, we want to take your other son with us next time round. Now they manage to convince Yaqub, and what happens when they go? It appears as though Binyamin, that son, stole, and he's detained. Then they have to come back to Dad once again and tell him that news, your son has gone missing. This time it's genuine. The first time it wasn't genuine. But look at the response of Yaqub alayhi salam. Very insightful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قَالَ بَلْ سَوَّلَتْ لَكُمْ أَنفُسُكُمْ أَمْرًا. He said, rather, your souls have beautified this to yourself. Did he say this before? He did, didn't he? This is exactly what he said before. فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ. And then he said, a beautiful patience. What does beautiful patience mean? Can someone remind me? Patience without? Patience without complaining. Now the first time, to do that the first time in your life is already amazing. But to do that a second time, that's even more amazing. فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ. Then he said, عَسَى اللَّهُ أَن يَأْتِيَنِي بِهِمْ جَمِيعًا. He said, perhaps Allah will bring them all back to me together. Now think about that. Some scholars said 40 years passed between the first loss and the second loss. When the second loss happened, Yaqub alayhi salam didn't just say, perhaps this son will come back to me. He said, perhaps all of them will come back to me. Meaning, I still got hope in Yusuf coming back as well. Yusuf, Benjamin, perhaps Allah will bring them all back to me. إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْعَلِيمُ الْحَكِيمُ. Indeed, He is all-knowing and all-wise. This is the reaction of Yaqub alayhi salam. Now the other verse, it tells us how Yaqub felt. And I think there's about 6 different descriptions used to explain his sadness. Okay, now listen to this. وَتَوَلَّ عَنْهُمْ. When the sons come and give that news, Yaqub says what he's going to say, and then he turns away from them. وَتَوَلَّ عَنْهُمْ وَقَالَ يَا أَسَفَ عَلَى يُوسُف. And then he speaks alone. He says, oh my asaf over Yusuf. What does asaf refer to? What type of sadness is that? Who was actually listening? What type of sadness is asaf? Was it? Asaf that? Sadness that? Say a bit louder, Habib. You take?
That takes over?
Takes over? No, that's not asaf.
The one that makes you angry.
Yes, the one that can come out in negative emotions, like anger. So he says, oh my bitter sadness over Yusuf. This is, he's recalling his trauma from many, many years ago. This one makes you remember what happened in the past. وَبَيَضَّتْ عَيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْحُزْنِ. And then Allah said, his eyes turned white from huzn. Huzn is a sadness over trauma in the past. Now I want you to think about that. His eyes turned white. What does that mean? Some scholars said it means he became blind. Some scholars said it means he became partially sighted. Because he cried so many tears over his son. Now, do you know anyone who feels that sad? Do you know anyone who's actually cried that much? You ever heard of a story about someone who's cried that much before? This is one of the beauties of the Quran. And I want you to really pay attention to this. What the Quran does, it presents extreme case scenarios. Extreme case scenarios, so that the reader becomes inspired. How does that work? If I said to you, I'll give you a ridiculous example. There's a sister, she's afraid to take a driving test, okay? She's really afraid. So another sister comes up to her and says, listen, Ukhti, look, you can do it. You know why? Because there was another sister. She passed a driving test and she is blind. She's like, what? She's blind. She said, yes, she's blind. And she passed a driving test. Now, if she can do it, can't you do it? She says, like, of course I can do it. I mean, if she can do it, she's blind, I can do it, right? This is an extreme case scenario. This is what it does. In the same way the Quran presents extreme case scenario of Yaqub. Do you know anyone who was this sad? You're like, no, I don't. I've never been that sad before. Okay, now pay attention to what happens to him. Because if it happened to him, it can happen to you. And then, فَهُوَ كَظِيمٌ. The verse ends, and he was Kadhim. The Kadhim, as the Zamakhshari says, is someone who swallows up his anger. Swallows up his anger. Someone who's like brimming with rage inside, but he holds on. He holds back. So the Quran tells us that he felt anger, he felt extreme sadness, but he was in control. He was disciplined. And then he said, and then the sons, they saw their father talking to himself, and they said, قَالُوا تَاللَّهِ. They said, by Allah. تَفْتَأُ تَذْكُرُ يُوسُفَ حَتَّى تَكُونَ حَرَضًا أَوْ تَكُونَ مِنَ الْهَالِكِينَ. They said, are you going to keep on talking about Yusuf until you become harad, which means someone who becomes skinny and withers away, or until you're going to explode? Meaning, you are going to let this sadness either whittle you down until you're nothing, or to make you, go into a frenzy and explode. Now, when they said that to Yaqub alayhi salam, he corrected them. They thought that he was complaining and whining. Yaqub said, no. قَالَ إِنَّمَا أَشْكُو بَثِّي وَحُزْنِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. He said, I'm only complaining about my bath and my huzn to who? To Allah. Now, what did we say bath referred to? What type of sadness? This is the one that you wanted to mention, isn't it? The type of sadness which permeates the whole body. He said, this birth of mine, which is going all the way to my fingertips, and the loss of my other son, I'm not complaining to you. I'm not whining. I'm actually speaking to Allah. And I'm complaining to Allah. So don't be mistaken. وَأَعْلَمُ مِنَ اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. And I know about Allah that which you don't know. Meaning, I have good assumptions about Allah. Now, from just these verses, we learn a number of lessons. Okay? The first lesson that we learn, my brothers and sisters, is that experiencing sadness does not make you any less of a human being. Isn't it? If Yaqub felt this sad, yet he's a prophet of God, Allah celebrates him in the Quran, it means that his sadness did not diminish his value before Allah. Am I right or wrong? Am I right or wrong? Tell me. Isn't it? He's a prophet of God. Allah said he cried so much over his son that his eyes went white, he became blind. Yet, that does not diminish his value before my eyes. Now, I think that's a very important misconception to clear up, isn't it? Many people, they talk about depression and they say, well, if you're a proper believer, then you don't really feel depressed, bro. So sort yourself out. Now, if a person was depressed and he heard that, he'd probably kill himself, isn't it? That'd probably be the straw that breaks the camel's back type of thing. Now, this, however, puts it straight. Actually, bro, it may not be the case that It's because of my iman being low that I'm feeling sad. Don't you know about Yaqub? Are you going to say that his iman was low and that's why he was sad? Are you going to say that? No, of course not. You're not going to say that. Yeah. This is the first point. Experiencing sadness does not diminish your value before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, doesn't diminish your value as a human being. The second very important lesson is one of the best ways to deal with sadness is to complain to Allah. Now, Ibn Taymiyyah, he said, look what Yaqub said. He said, Ashku, I'm complaining. But then before he said, I'm going to have sabrun jameel, which is a patience without complaining. How do we reconcile? He said the way you reconcile is that he wasn't complaining to people, he was complaining to Allah. Yeah. So what we would say is that one of the coping mechanisms, if you like, for dealing with extreme sadness is to what? Is to complain to Allah. Now let's be honest with ourselves. How many times do we actually do that? How many times do you actually say, Ya Allah, this dissertation, Ya Allah, really is getting to me now. It's way too much. 120 pages and I'm not even page number 1 yet. Please, Ya Allah, make it happen for me. How many of us actually try that? Here we're learning from a prophet of God. This is one of the ways he used to deal with his sadness. Another lesson that we learn from this is the first reaction we should have in times of misfortune is one of patience. One of patience and one of positive thinking. Now, where is that taught to us in the verse? That his first reaction was one of patience. Who can identify in these verses? Where do we learn that from Yaqub, that his first reaction was patience? Yes?
Is it the background at the top, which is the beautiful patience?
Very good. The first thing he says, after telling his sons, I don't believe you, is what? فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ. You know something very beautiful about that statement, is that in Arabic language, فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ is not a complete sentence. فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ is not a complete sentence. You know when you're really sad, you can't get the words out of you. You just talk in bits, some words come out. فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ is almost like that. Like beautiful patience. That's it, beautiful patience. Yeah. And this is what Prophet Musa taught us. He once passed by a woman in a graveyard. She was lamenting over her son that passed away. And she didn't know that it was the Prophet ﷺ that was next to her, because when he told her, look, may Allah make things easy for you, have patience, don't behave like this. She said, what do you know about my situation? Yeah. And the person just walked away. And then someone came up to her and said, that was the Prophet ﷺ there. So she went up to the Prophet ﷺ and she apologized. The Prophet said, As-sabru inda sadmatil ula. He said, real patience is at the first strike of the calamity. The real patience is at the first strike of the calamity. Time is a healer. But if you want to gain some benefit from your misfortune, force yourself to try and have patience at the very first moment that things start to get a bit difficult. In another beautiful hadith, the Prophet said, مَن يَتَصَبَّرْ يُصَبِّرْهُ اللَّهُ. He said in an authentic hadith, whoever tries to have patience, Allah will make him patient. Yeah? Whoever tries to have patience, Allah will make him patient. This is very beautiful. You're basically being told that Allah will take ownership of your situation as long as you try to do the right thing. Now, what is the opposite of having patience? What's the opposite of having patience? Someone says, you know what? Okay, sabr is one thing. What's the other extreme? Yeah.
Being impatient, wanting things now.
What was that?
Wanting things to happen now.
Wanting things to happen now, okay. In terms of word statements, what kind of things would people say if they're not going to have patience? Someone, he says, oh, forget patience, I'm going to have the opposite of patience. What kind of... Yes? Yeah, impatience. Anything else? Yep.
Why me?
Why me? Attitude, yep. Yes, sister?
Hasty.
What was it?
Hasty.
Hasty. Yeah. I haven't got time. Why me? What did I do wrong? Isn't that another very common reaction? What did I ever do wrong anyway? Yeah. What did I ever do wrong anyway? Let's not get the list out right now. The question itself is not really good. Yes.
Reckless?
Yes, behaving recklessly. All of these things. This is the behavior to avoid, and the behavior to try and nurture in yourself is to try and be patient from the very beginning. It's very difficult, But the Prophet said, if you do that, Allah will help you do that. Moreover, the way it will help you personally in your own life is that it will soften the blow. And it will help you manage your sadness, which is what you want ultimately, isn't it? Everyone who is feeling sad or has low moods or wants to say they're depressed, ultimately what they want is ways to help them cope. And this is what the Quran is teaching us. It's teaching us ways of doing that. Now if you tie those two things together, that Yaqub complained to Allah and that Yaqub had patience, you can actually learn something else, which is one of the ways to be patient. And this is what a lot of people will ask, okay bro, you said be patient, but how do I be patient? Well, one of the ways to be patient is to talk to Allah. A person who talks to Allah and complains to Allah, he will find in that conversation with Allah the ability to be patient. Yeah. So this is another thing. Another lesson that we learn from this. How many phones do you have, bro? It's not you. Is the one at the front? Sorry, you're the culprit, man. Another lesson that we learned just from this passage is the power of positive thinking. Now, Yaqub, he was very positive, even in the face of such a traumatic piece of news. Your other son, he's been detained. We don't know what's going to happen to him now. What did he say in response? He said, "Asa Allah an ya'tiyani bihim jami'a." Perhaps Allah will bring them all back to me together. He was super positive. Yeah? He was super positive, and a lot of people say that one of the ways to get yourself out of depression is to change the way you think. But the problem which I was speaking to Khalid about in the car is that for people who don't have faith, people who don't believe in Allah, people who don't believe in the hereafter, the idea of reward and punishment, really and truly, what is there to pin your hopes on? What is there to pin your hopes on if you're not going to say, you know what, this is the situation that I'm in right now, but perhaps Allah will turn things around for me. Or perhaps if I am feeling like this today, then tomorrow after I die, I will get a reward from Allah. Or there'll be something better for me later on. Then what is it that you can cling on to? Yeah? What is it that you can cling on to? So this is another thing that we learn. The power of positive thinking. Now, there's quite a lot to get through, so I'm just going to rush through the next part. Yaqub alayhi salam, after he experiences this sadness, after he complains to Allah, after he corrects his sons, he then comes out with a practical piece of advice. What does he tell his sons? He says, "Ya baniya idhabu fatahassasu min Yusufa wa akhihi wa la tayasu min rawhillah." Subhanallah. He says, "My dear children, go and seek out Yusuf and his brother, and do not despair of the mercy of Allah." Now you would have thought that it would have been the sons telling Dad, don't give up on the hope of Allah, isn't it? In fact, it's Dad telling his sons, don't give up in the hope of Allah. And the word used is rawh, rawhillah. Yeah? They said the word rawh comes from the word rih, which means a cool breeze. On a hot summer's day, when you feel the cool breeze, it brings relaxation to you, brings comfort. Allah is using the word rawh here, which is about His mercy, which brings relief. So He said to His kids, don't give up in the cool mercy of Allah. And that teaches us an important lesson. That though we may say feeling sad and feeling extreme sadness is not really a problem in and of itself, what is a problem is what it can lead to. One of the things it can lead to is a person gives up hope in Allah. And that for a believer is not an option. Your sadness should not result in you giving up on the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Yaqub, he ends by saying, إِنَّهُ لَا يَيْأَسُ مِنْ رَوْحِ اللَّهِ. Indeed, the only ones who give up hope in Allah, إِلَّا الْقَوْمُ الْكَافِرُونَ, are people who are disbelievers. Yeah? People who are disbelievers. Now, I just want to shed some light on this question. Why do bad things happen to good people? In order to tackle this question, again, looking at what the Quran says about this idea. We have a story in the Quran, Surah Kahf, of Moses, and Khidr. Have you heard of this story before? Interesting story, isn't it? Musa and Khidr. Now, just to run through it very quickly, Musa alayhi salam, he's sent on a journey to find knowledge. And he's told to go to this man called Khidr, who lives in a very mysterious place. By the way, the name Khidr, the Prophet said it comes from the root of Khadra, green. He's known as the green man, because wherever he would go, the land would turn green. Man, bless him. So he goes to him, and after a very difficult journey, they get lost on the way. He finally finds him and he says to him, can I follow you around so you can teach me something of what you know of guidance? Now what does Khidr say to him? He says, you don't have the patience to study with me, my friend. إِنَّكَ لَن تَسْتَطِيعَ مَعِيَ صَبْرًا. He said, you don't have the patience to study with me. وَكَيْفَ تَصْبِرُ عَلَى مَا لَمْ تُحِطَ بِهِ خُبْرًا. And how are you going to have patience over some things that you can't comprehend? Sometimes in life, you see something happen to you or somebody else, and you can't figure it out. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't have a logical explanation. He's saying, you are going to see things from me, they're not going to make sense at the first time. However, they do make sense if you understand it from a particular perspective. So, Musa alayhi salam says, you know what, it's fine. I'm ready for this. Inshallah, sabir, I'll be a patient person. And so the journey begins. There are 3 stops in this journey. The first stop is where? Where is the first place to go? They go on a boat. They go on a boat. And what does Khidr do? He says to Musa, come with me to the bottom of the deck. And there, فَخَرَقَ, he starts to pull out the planks of the boat. Musa alayhi salam is shocked. He's like, what are you doing? This is just لَقَدْ جِئْتَ شَيْئًا نُكْرًا. You're doing something which is clearly wrong. Now what does Khidr say? He says, look, I told you, you're not going to have patience with me. Didn't I tell you that? Musa alayhi salam says, you know what? Please don't hold me to account. Please don't be so strict with me. Give me one more chance. So Khidr gives him another chance. So I'll strike 1. What happens? What's the second stop? Who did they meet along the way? A young boy, ghulam, a boy below the age of puberty. What does Khidr do? He goes up to him and kills him. He kills a young innocent boy. Musa alayhi salam, he's so shocked. He said, what have you done? لَقَدْ جِئْتَ شَيْئًا نُكْرًا. You've done something which is just so bad that no sensible person in this world will say that is a good thing. Yeah? Then Khidr says to him, look, I told you, you don't have the patience to study with me. Musa alayhi salam says, you know what? One more chance. Just one more chance. I've maxed out my excuses. So if I do anything now, you can go your way, I'll go my way. Last place to go is through a village. This village, they are hungry. Istata'ama. They ask the people for some food. But everyone that they ask for food from, they refuse them. For Abaw, they refuse them. They knock on someone's door. Do you mind? We're just traveling. Some food, please. I'm sorry, we don't do food in this place. Next person, knock on the door. Just some water. Sorry, we don't serve water in this place. See, these people are so mean. And then Khidr, he finds a wall, يُرِيدُ أَن يَنْقَضَّ, a wall that wants to fall down. Like a monument or something that's about to collapse. What does Khidr do? He puts up his sleeve, he says, you know what, we're going to rebuild this right now. And Musa alayhi salam is shocked. These people didn't give us water, you want to rebuild their monument? What's going on here? So he rebuilds the whole thing, and Musa alayhi salam is zipped. He's not going to say a word. I don't know what to say yet. But as they're walking away from the wall, Musa alayhi salam says to him, if you wanted, you could have taken some money for that. You could take some money for that if you wanted. Khidr says, you know what? That's not a question, but you're questioning me. I know you're questioning me. هَذَا فِرَاقُ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنِي. This is the point, I go my way and you go your way. Now, before I do leave you, Musa, I'm going to explain to you what happened back there. Yeah, I'm going to explain to you what happened back there. He says, as for the ship, it belonged to poor people. They were working in the ocean, and they didn't know that right around the corner, there was a pirate. There was a king who was a pirate, and he would have taken your boat, or their boat, if he had saw it in good condition. But because he would see it in bad condition, he would spare their lives. The first lesson, therefore, Musa, is what? Sometimes a minor harm is done in order to prevent a major harm. First lesson. What's the second stop? What happened in the second stop? The boy is killed, right? So Musa alayhi salam, maybe he's thinking, you know what, fair enough, okay. The first one, alright. The second one, though, come on. You killed the boy. Why did you do that for? Khidr says to him, look, you know what? You didn't know this, but that boy, his parents were very religious people. And this boy would actually grow up to compel them to kufr and tughyan, to disbelief and to rebellion. How does that happen? Well, because sometimes parents love their children so much, they do anything for them, even if it's things that they should be doing. Isn't that true? Happens sometimes. So he said that Allah wanted to replace that child with another child who would be a better son and a better worshipper of Allah. So the second lesson was what? Sometimes bad things happen to good people to save them from a disaster in the hereafter. Had that son lived, those parents may have gone to the hellfire. Now, in retrospect, when they're in the hellfire, they would say, Ya Allah, if you knew this boy was going to send us to the hellfire, why didn't you take him away from us? Yeah? Second lesson, sometimes bad things happen to good people to save them from a disaster in the hereafter. SubhanAllah. Beautiful lesson. The third one, why did you build a wall for those people? They were so mean to us. He said, well, you didn't know this, but that wall, under it was buried a treasure belonging to 2 orphans, young boys, dads not around. Now, if that wall fell over and that treasure became exposed, what do you think the people are going to do? Do you think they're going to share with them? No, they wouldn't give us water. They would steal their money. He said, Allah wanted that those boys grow up to be strong, then they discover the treasure so they can benefit from it. Third lesson is what? Sometimes you want something in life, but Allah knows that if it came to you at that moment in time, you would squander it. You wouldn't be able to benefit from it. Okay? I'll come to you just a second. So for example, a brother, mashallah, looking to get married. I know marriage examples getting a bit dry now, but another one comes. Brother wants to get married, mashallah, tabarakallah. He makes a proposal, doesn't go through, makes another proposal, doesn't go through. He's on proposal number 20 now. And he's saying to himself, you know, what's going on here? I just can't get married. On Laylatul Qadr I went. On Laylatul Qadr I went, I cried my eyes out, I asked Allah, Ya Allah, please, the wife. And still nothing. But then he reads the story, he's thinking, you know what? Perhaps if I got married now, things may not work out for me. Maybe it's better Allah is delaying it, just like He delayed the treasure coming to the orphans. Okay? So these are the 3 like super lessons that we learn from the story of Musa and Khidr. And to be honest, one of the supreme lessons from this, my brothers and sisters, is to appreciate that Allah has a plan for everything in this universe. Allah had a plan for the plank on the boat. Allah had a plan for that young child. Allah had a plan for the orphans. Allah had a plan for the wall itself was part of Allah's plan. Therefore, if a person appreciates Allah has a plan, he will what? He will surrender himself to Allah's plan. And he will tell himself that, you know what? There is always wisdom in what Allah does. And this, therefore, becomes a way of dealing with misfortunes in your life. Yeah? Now, there were some handouts. I don't know if it's possible to print them out for the brothers and sisters. Or you can email them. Yeah? What I have in the rest of the slides are some supplications that the Prophet taught us to say specifically when we feel sadness, we feel low, we feel, if you want to call the word, depressed. And these words are supplications that we should make. So these are other things that we can do as well. Now, inshallah, if you email them out, you can have them with you and you can memorize them and you can use them, inshallah. I just want to end by saying a final point. Why did I avoid the word depression? Why did I only use the word sadness? One of the reasons, my brothers and sisters, and this is my own personal opinion, is that with depression comes a label. And with any label, there are many different connotations and baggage, if you like. Sometimes a person, if he gives himself a label, he may exacerbate his problem because he is assuming he has every other thing associated with that label. Do you follow me? If a person instead says, you know what, I I'm down, I'm feeling sad, and you know what, I've got a problem. But let me not go ahead and label myself. Let me try to deal with it in a more organic way. Doing that may actually help a person. For example, they say, a woman, subhanAllah, who's been the victim of rape, she should call herself a rape survivor, not a rape victim. Why? Because even in that terminology, that wording, there is some empowerment. There's some sense of empowerment. So this is one of the reasons why I chose to avoid the word depression and instead talk about sadness, inshallah. I understand many people have questions. How are we going to do the questions?
Text this number and then we'll get the...
Okay, so whoever wants to put up their hands and ask questions, they can. And whoever wants to text, we have a phone at the front here. We can take questions, inshallah. Yes, sister.
Okay, so back to the story of Yaqub alayhi salam.
Yep.
So he felt, he had something wrong with it. He was a positive thinker.
Yep.
But at the same time, he had all three examples of sadness. I'm not doubting the Quran in any way, I was just trying to understand it. Is that possible to have those contrasting feelings at the same time, or is it at different? Is it like humanity goes up and it goes down? Is that not that to say it's not possible, but
Yeah.
to have just run in there to that degree, but then I'm still.
Yeah. This is.
I can only think about it in my scope of thinking. And
Yeah.
thinking that.
So it's a very good question. The idea of having mixed feelings, or even extreme mixed feelings. And on top of that, having a good assumption about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How do they all come together? Well, this is very important clarification to be made here. There's a difference between the ibtila and the mubtali. If you memorize it like this, it will be easy to understand. The difference between ibtila and the mubtali. What is the ibtila? It is the actual calamity itself. What is the mubtali? It is the one who decreed the calamity. These are the two. This is the dichotomy you should make in your mind. Okay, how does that help? Well, you know that the Prophet ﷺ, his sons that he had, Qasim and Ibrahim, they passed away. Now when Ibrahim passed away, he was like a toddler, he was just about to start walking. And when he passed away, the Prophet ﷺ was grief-stricken and he began to cry. Now some of the companions, they saw him crying and they were quite amazed. They said, Ya Rasulullah, do you cry? Like, we thought that's an unmanly thing to do, to start crying. So what did the Prophet say? He said, indeed the heart feels grief, the eyes shed tear, but the lips only say that which is pleasing to Allah. Very beautiful. And in this way, Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah said that the Prophet combined between grief in the heart and belief in the Creator in a very beautiful way. How does that work? Well, when you think about the tragedy, you feel sad. Natural. At the same time, when you think about who decreed the tragedy, you think to yourself, yeah, but Allah did that to me. Does Allah want bad to happen to me, or does He want good to happen to me? No, Allah only wants good to happen to me. Does Allah care for me? Of course Allah cares for me. Does Allah love me? Of course Allah loves me. Allah loves me more than my own mother. Now when you think about Allah, what does it allow you to do? It allows you to have positive thinking. It allows you to have good assumptions. Do you see how the two come together? So this is how we should try to educate and nurture our hearts to be like. We can be sad with the problem at hand, but when you think about the one who caused the problem, the one who decreed the problem, we should at the same time feel, you know what? Allah only wants the best for me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help me. Allah will remove this from me. I just need to rely on Him. I just need to do what I need to do. I need to stop myself from behaving negatively in these situations. If I do these things that I can, Allah will take care of my situation. Yeah? Allah, I hope that helps. Someone asked a question. Are there examples of Prophet Muhammad having similar things to Yaqub? Yep, so I think I gave one there. Somebody asked, after having suffered making dua, would you recommend to listen to certain surahs or do ruqya? Okay, this ruqya can be understood in two ways. Firstly, what is ruqya? It is reciting the Quran or some prophetic supplications with the intention that Allah removes the problem. This is what ruqya is. You recite in order to alleviate a problem. This can work for any problem in your life. It can work for spiritual problems, medical problems, any problems. Because Allah says the Quran, huwa shifa lin-nas. It is a cure for the believers, not nas, for the believers. So this is one general sense. However, there's a more specific sense, and that is dealing with spiritual diseases, or if you like, to do with jinn or the evil eye. When it comes to those, a person who is qualified will be able to say, you know what, your issues in life right now are to do with jinn or black magic or whatever it is. So your treatment should be ruqya. And you can do part of that yourself, and part of it can be done for you by a specialist. However, he may at the same time say, you know what, your problems are a mental illness. You might have schizophrenia, you might have some other problem. And therefore you should seek professional advice from someone from a medical background. Okay, you may need to take some medicine or whatever it is. So you can do ruqya for any problem. But if you believe that, you know what, you may have a particular problem to do with jinn or black magic or evil eye, then seek help from the professionals, which is the raqi, and get them to do a diagnosis. Yeah, and they can do that, by the way. People who know what to do, they know how to differentiate between a mental illness or a spiritual type of disease or something like that. Yes?
Yeah, some people either go two ways in terms of like as a treatment for depression. I mean, some people say, oh, you know, if you turn to Allah and think to Allah, then you can get cured. But then other people turn to medication, like you said, depression tablets, etc.
Yeah.
But some people can't find a balance and say, you know, because these medicines, they're from Allah itself,
Yeah.
you should be focused on those medicines. And then some people say, obviously, if you're a Muslim, you turn to Allah, you turn
Yeah.
to the Quran. What's the right balance then?
It's a very good question. The brother asked, where's the balance? You know, somebody may say, look, when you're feeling depressed, take medicine. Somebody says, no, you should turn to Allah. But the other brother says, yeah, the medicines are from Allah. So, like, you know, where's the balance there? Well, what we learned today is that there are the primary tools, and then there are the secondary tools. When it comes to the primary tools, number one is what? Is to deal with your sadness by way of having sabr, complaining to Allah, having patience, yeah, and making dua. These are the primary tools. These will be the most beneficial tools if a person uses them properly, and supplication. But then there are secondary tools as well. Yeah, part of them is medicine, part of them is counselling, part of them is, you know, seeking other medical advice from professionals, you know, cognitive behavior therapy and all the rest of it. So you can look at it holistically. And as Muslims, this is one of the things that we are unique in, that we can look at these problems in a more holistic way. Yeah? And not just that, but in a way that is more substance-based as well, and more impactful as well. People will benefit from these teachings, you know, more than just looking at it from one perspective, a medical perspective. Many people I know in the pharmacy, they come in year after year, same medication for depression. I ask them, look, how's your situation at the moment? Do you think you'll be able to come off the medicines? Do you think you need to increase dosage? And they say, look, well, I don't know. I don't know whether it's working or not. Seriously, you don't know whether it's working or not? So, yeah, I don't know. So I said, if you were to come off it, what do you think? They go, I haven't been taking it for the last month anyway. Seriously, you haven't taken it for the last month, so how do you feel? I feel the same. So is that good or bad? I said, no, it's not good. I don't feel good. So how much benefit is there in these types of treatment? Yeah. Clinical evidence is there. However, the situation is more complicated than that. Therefore, having a holistic view is better, inshallah. Yes?
You mentioned that Abu Salam had this high threshold for patients.
Yep.
Is this resilience? Is this built up, or is it inherently given to some people? Can someone practically build up patience?
Yeah. Okay. So the brother asked about patience. Is it something that comes naturally to some people? or is it something that you can build in yourself? There are some people who have, mashallah, they have a lot of tolerance in them, they have a lot of determination, and they have that type of robustness about themselves. However, first of all, there's always a minimum. There's always a minimum threshold that every Muslim needs to hold themselves up to that standard. So we spoke about that. We said that, well, you cannot go to a place where you lose hope of Allah. Where you say, you know what, Allah, astaghfirullah, He can't help me in my situation. That's a minimum that no Muslim can go to. However, a person can nurture that sabr, definitely. Yeah. One of the ways of nurturing it is to read about those who had sabr. Yeah. When you read about Yaqub alayhi salam, you're like, you know what? If you manage to have sabr in those times, in those difficult circumstances, you know what? What about me? Yeah. What about me? Another way to have sabr is to be around the right people. Sometimes a person, he's very pessimistic, always thinks bad things are going to happen to him. And what happens is that those people, they like to spend time with other people who are also very pessimistic as well. The brother's like, you know what, tomorrow I think I'm going to fail my exam, and his friend comes along and says, yeah, and then I don't even think you're going to pass the retake, bro, man, the way things are going, Yeah, it's true, man, life is so bad, things aren't going to get better. He's like, yeah, it's true, yeah. No, those type of people, you need to realize that they're not helping your situation. Yeah? Rather be around the people that will help you to think positively in these situations. Yeah? Wallah. A question here. By complaining to Allah, would you advise not to talk to anyone about how you feel and only Allah? Yes, good question. You see here, this is the best practice. In medicine, you have best practice, and then you have what's less than that. Okay? What the Quran teaches us is the best practice. Sabrul Jameel is like the highest grade of sabr. Patience without any complaining. Right? However, if a person is unable to achieve that, then he should do what? Do the next level down. Yeah? Which may be having patience, but at the same time seeking counsel and advice from people, maybe going to a counsellor for some help. And he shouldn't really think any less of himself. However, he should say to himself, it would have been better if I could push myself to be like Yaqub. And if I did, number one, it may be better for me. Number two, I might get more reward. Number three, I might get out of this situation quicker than I'm going to do now. But if I cannot, then inshallah, I shouldn't look down on myself. Yeah, so if we look at it like that, it'll be easy, inshallah. Yeah.
What if you're unsure that you have depression or another disorder, despite having those feelings all the time, and you're not sure? What if you're faking it in a way?
What if you're
faking it? You have this sort of feeling that you're not actually being genuine.
If you're faking it, well, I mean,
even if it's sort of self-doubt.
Yeah. The thing is it that you're unsure whether you are depressed or you're unsure that you're sad? You can't really be unsure that you're sad. This is another benefit, isn't it? That look, the fact is, whether it's depression or whether it's sadness, the root issue is that I just have a low mood. Yeah, I'm not motivated. I feel sad. Basically, that's what it comes down to. Yeah. So again, will it really help you if you are diagnosed as clinically depressed? Will it help you? Maybe it would. Maybe it would. Maybe it would be like, you know what? If I've been told that I'm clinically depressed, now I need to get help. Yeah. And for some people, it may work because, there's different types of depression. There's the moderate depression, there's severe depression. Somebody might be on the border of suicidal thoughts. They need to be told, look, your situation is serious. You are clinically depressed. It may work for that person. Yeah. For other people, actually, it's just a moment of sadness in their life because of certain root causes they know. And it's best to consider yourself as someone who's feeling very sad and to try and deal with it themselves using what they know of the Islamic teachings. Allah. Yes?
I was wondering if the Quran obviously focuses on turning to Allah.
Yep.
If you feel sad. But does the way of does that focus create a barrier for a lot of people to go to a counselor, to go to a doctor? Because even though they might feel as if they're betraying Allah or as if they're not being good enough in some way, if they do that option.
Okay, it's a good question. If the Quranic focus is, look, if you have problems, turn to Allah. Then somebody says, well, okay, but what if I talk to my friend? What if I talk to a counselor? What if I talk to my GP? Is that an issue? No, it is not an issue. That's what we explained. We said that the Quran is going to give us the best practice. Try this. And if you cannot, then at least aspire to try it. Okay? Meanwhile, do what you can. Meanwhile, do what you can. To be honest, this is a very a powerful way of nurturing a following. That you give them the ideal standards, encourage them to aspire to them, and tell them that meanwhile they can use other tools, to try and help themselves. So this is perhaps the best way of looking at it, inshallah. Okay, mashallah, there's a lot of questions. Okay, Barakallahu Feek Ustad, for the wonderful reminders. I wish to ask the question regarding the sadness the person experienced after the death of his wife Khadija and his uncle. I remember the hadith about he saw having thoughts of throwing himself to the mountain. Could you kindly elaborate on the story and share some gems? So there's an incident that happens in the life of the Prophet when he becomes a prophet in the seerah. When he experiences revelation for the first time, is very traumatic. When he comes home to his wife Khadija, what does he say? Zammiluni, zammiluni. Cover me, cover me. He was shaking. He was physically affected by the experience of Jibreel coming to him and embracing him and then giving him that revelation. To the point that for the next few days it is said that the Prophet experienced thoughts which were extreme in that he felt as though, I don't know what's happening to me in my life right now. And some of the books of Seerah they mention narrations where he said, as if I wanted to move from this mountain, move off this mountain. Words to that effect. Okay. Now, what's one of the benefits we can take from that? Again, one of the benefits is if you experience those type of feelings, it doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad person. Number two, why was he made to feel like that when he becomes a prophet? Why was he made to feel like that when he became a prophet? One of the reasons is in order to make him realize that what's going to happen to you in your future is going to be very challenging. And you need to be a tough person in order to see this mission. And that's why Jibreel embraced him so hard to make him realize that, things are going to be tough in your life right now. And to be honest, this is what we call tough love, isn't it? Parents, when they have children, sometimes they can express that love in a negative way. They may wrap them in wool and, they may not make them very tough. And then when the child is becoming a young adult and they experience bullying, for example, in the playground, or something like that, then they come home and they're distraught. And one of the reasons is because, Mum, you never taught me about things like this in life. You never taught me to be a strong person. You never taught me to speak out against people that are going to be mean to me. Why didn't you do that? So this is one of the reasons why the Prophet was put through such difficulties in the beginning, in order to train him, if you like, for the challenges that are going to come later on in his life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Okay, one more question. Is it possible to have good balance between the prescribed supplications and antidepressants, or should you just avoid the medicine? Well, if a person thinks that they need antidepressants, they should get a diagnosis from the GP and find out what type of depression it is. Is it mild? Is it moderate? Is it severe? If a person has moderate or severe type of depression, then we would advise them to take the antidepressants. At the same time, the person should not restrict himself to this alone. This is an important point. Don't restrict yourself to this alone as if the only cure to your problem is through this. Rather, there's so much more, which we have discussed. If a person only has a mild form of depression, then we would advise that perhaps if you avoided it, it may be better for you. And you relied on these other treatments, these other therapies that we mentioned, it may be better for you. So perhaps doing that, if you had mild depression, may be better. How long do you have for? Another 20 minutes. MashaAllah. I don't get depressed after going through these questions. Okay, you want to ask another question? Just at the back, then I'll come to you. At the back there. Yes, sister. So if I understood the question, how do you explain to your parents your feelings of sadness when they try to dismiss it? Is that correct? Did I understand the question properly? How do you explain to your parents that you feel sad when they're trying to dismiss it? Yeah? Okay, cool. So I think one of the ways to explain to parents, subhanAllah, is that first of all, understand that where they came from, where the place that they came from, the culture that they came from, it's one in which these types of feelings are stigmatized, looked down on, and you diminish as a person if you claim to have those types of feelings. Yeah. However, that doesn't mean they don't love you. It doesn't mean they don't care for you. It doesn't mean that they want to help you. Yeah, I think that's important to appreciate the idea of snap out of it. What's wrong with you? That type of mentality is there amongst our elders. Yeah, and for good or bad reasons, we should at least acknowledge that, if not have a level of respect for that, and make excuses for them. This is the first thing. I think the second thing is to ask them, look, whatever the situation may be, whether it's good or bad, I'm feeling it right now. And I just need you to help me in whichever way you can. And if you can speak to them more, tell them that, look, in the Quran, there are examples. Didn't the Prophet feel sad when his son passed away? Didn't Yaqub alayhi salam feel sad when Yusuf went missing, and so on and so forth? Feeling these type of feelings is not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah, feeling these type of feelings may not necessarily be a bad thing, inshallah. Wallahu alam. Yeah, you wanted to ask, yeah?
I was also wondering if from the talk of today, I assume that there is a lot of stories or pieces in the Quran addressing to think differently with the support of Allah.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if there were a lot of pieces that write about changing behavior, maybe in order to try and feel better. If there's also pieces, I think that's an option, or if it's more focused on the cognitive.
Do you mean like practical pieces of advice on behavioral changes?
Yeah, to try, for example, if you're stuck in the cycle of thinking negatively,
Yeah.
to try something new in your behavior, which might affect your thinking as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of passages in the Quran which speak about behavioral changes. And to be honest, they fall under the banner of good deeds. Yeah? Good deeds represent a whole category of activities in which a person, if he engages, he will benefit from them. Not only in the hereafter, but in this life as well. In fact, the Quran is very pro-activism, if you like. If you think about Surah Al-Asr, everyone knows Surah Al-Asr, right? It's the one that you guys always read in the Salah. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Look at this. Allah said people are destined to fail except people who believe, people who do good deeds, people who tell others about the truth, and people who tell others to have patience. This is activism, no? This is activism. Allah didn't say you need to believe and do the right thing yourself. No, if you want to be the exception to the rule, you need to go out there and reform the world that you live in. Get people to understand the truth and embrace it. And then deal with the consequences of that. When you're trying to reform society, some people are not going to like it. Some people are going to say to you, you know what? We don't like what you're doing, mate, and we're not going to let you do it anymore. What do you need to have then? وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. You need to have determination and resolve. And the word tawasaw, وَتَوَاصَوْا, it is the plural, meaning this needs to be done as a collective, not as individuals. So even working together as a group in order to make a change is part of the 4 things that you need to have if you want to escape failure. This is one of the shortest surahs in the Quran, and Imam Shafi'i would say, whoever reflects over this surah will be enough for him. What is the surah about? Essentially, it is about being an active person in the world. Yeah? And all the behavior that comes along with that. If you believe you are part of a cause and you have a vision in life to make a change, you maybe won't have time to feel sad. Seriously. Your time may not be there for you to dwell on what is negative in your life because you're always trying to make a change. So definitely, if you read the Quran from this perspective, you'll find amazing things. Yeah, you'll find amazing things. Even a brother mentioned to me recently, you know the hadith about the man who killed 99 people? Yeah. What does he do? He kills 99 people, and then he asks the man who's supposed to be a worshipper of God, what should I do? What does he say to him? Huh? Very good. He says you're not going to be forgiven. What does he do? He does what he knows. He kills him. Then he goes to a scholar. What does the scholar say to him? He says to him, move. Go somewhere else. Go somewhere else. When he's on that journey to change his environment, as the brother said, what happens? Death comes. He dies midway. In fact, he dies not midway, closer to the place of his place of crimes than the place of change. And Allah sends two angels. They begin to dispute with one another. What should be the fate of this man? He hasn't yet reached the halfway point. Allah tells them, make the ground become shorter from the place of change to where he died, and enter him into paradise. Allahu Akbar. Yeah. One of the beautiful lessons we learn from this hadith is what? Sometimes you need to change your environment. Sometimes you need to change your company. And that could be the answer to your problems. Yeah? That could be the answer to your problems. But this is another example of behavioral change, perhaps. Okay, why do we see many wealthy people go through depression? Does this show money don't buy happiness? Is that part of the song? I'm just wondering. Does this show money don't buy happiness? Sounds like it's part of a song. Okay, you tell me, brothers and sisters. Does money buy happiness? Well, someone says it pays the rent, bro. So what's the answer?
It depends how you spend it and how you control the money. Whether the money has control over you or you have control over the money.
Okay, very good. He said it depends. Is it the case that the money has control over you or you have control over your money? If it's the other way around, then perhaps you won't find happiness. Another point about money is that for the Muslim, this world represents a spectrum of means to an end. What is the end? The end is to build a better future for ourselves after we die. That is the end, isn't it? If you see this world, your job, your career, your education, as means in order to achieve that aim, then they all become positive parts of your life. But when you see those things as ends in and of themselves, that's when they become problematic. Why? Because they become barriers to achieving that success in hereafter. This is a very important piece of advice. Yeah? And to be honest, if you really internalize this advice, excuse me, it could change the decisions that you make in your life. It could change the job that you choose to take, whether you want to do a master's or you don't want to do a master's, who you get married to, who you don't get married to, how you raise your kids. All of that, you're thinking, well, how does this decision impact me after I die? Is it going to be positive? Or is it going to be negative? Or is it going to be fruitless? Yeah? So in that way, we can understand money as well. If you understand it to be, if you use it as a means towards that higher objective, then money's not a problem. We have an example in the Quran about a man who had wealth like you could not imagine. Allah gave him an empire that was so huge, so beautiful, that no one after him in human history or in the future will ever have an empire as great as his. Do you know who this man is? Sulaiman alayhi salam. Sulaiman alayhi salam, he had an empire who he says, لا ينبغي لأحد من بعدي. No one's going to be able to rival this empire of mine. Allah gave me that. Allah gave him the power over jinn. Allah gave him power over birds. Allah allowed him to speak to birds. Allah gave him so many things. Yet, Sulaiman alayhi salam, though he was the wealthiest, most powerful, he was a man who was attached to Allah, a prophet of Allah, and a man who was always grateful to Allah. Which tells us that having a lot of money doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a bad person. It doesn't. When do I know it's going to make me bad, or when do I know it's going to make me good? Well, it depends on how you use it and why you want it. If you want it for the wrong reasons, then it's going to be bad for you. Or if you spend it on the wrong things, then it's bad for you. But if you want it for the right reasons, to champion Islam, to champion Islamic causes, to help other people, to help yourself, then having it is not a problem. If you use it then for the right reasons, it's not a problem. Yeah? Okay. I'll tell you one more question. You allow me to say just one more question? Yeah. Okay. Right, let's have a look. How should a person help someone who is suffering from depression, especially when they deny it or not recognize it in themselves? That's a good question. Let me just look. Is there any other? Can you actually get possessed by a jinn, or is it not possible? Interesting. Then what should you do if you're okay? How do you go about distancing yourself from people who are not khair for you and don't want to help in deen? Okay, let's have a look at this question. How do you go about distancing yourself from people who are not good for you and don't want to be helped in the deen? Here, there is a very good hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. He said that a believer who mixes with the people and is patient on their annoyances is better than the believer who keeps himself to himself. Yeah? And the majority of scholars are of this opinion, that it's better for us to interact with one another and be in each other's company than it is to isolate ourselves and to be alone. One of the reasons for that is, again, the Prophet said that the wolf devours the lone sheep. And we know this, brothers and sisters. When you're alone by yourself, then all types of thoughts start coming into your head. Yeah? And temptation comes, impulse comes. When you're with a group of people like this, then you think twice about doing any dodgy stuff, isn't it? Like, you know what? Everyone's got a beard around there. Do anything now, say anything now, I'm going to get taken out. It's true, isn't it? This is advice of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, with regards to this question, the criteria for whether or not you should be around someone or keep their company is whether you feel overall you are being positively influenced yourself and positively influencing the other person. If you feel that being around a certain person is overall negatively influencing you from their company, then you should take a step back. However, if you feel that, you know, there may be certain things which are not good, certain things are said, certain things are done, but overall, I don't feel my iman has been negatively impacted. In fact, I feel like this person may have benefited from my company. Then, bear it. If you do, you are like the man that the Prophet said, he's better than the one who spends time by himself. Yeah. Again, it points to the idea of being active amongst people. Yeah. Being people who are influential and not people that are influenced by others. So perhaps this little principle can help in this scenario, inshallah. Okay, brothers and sisters, jazakumullah khair. Barakallahu feekum. Hada wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.